therapy, that means I must be broken.
Yeah, you probably are broken.
Oh my God. Don't tell me. You're so mean.
I will be playing shame for this episode. So I want you all to know that you're broken and there's something wrong with you. You'll never be fixed. If you have any problems, then the whole house of cards is going to come down. It's not real, but it's happening to you anyway. No one has ever had this happen before, and also all the people that have this are just making it up. You're making it up. You could just get out of it if you would just be better. If you were meant to exist, if you were meant to be part of this world, then this wouldn't be.
Then you wouldn't be having the shame at all. Yeah, right. The worst. Yes. So there's clearly this like human universal of shame. Like if you can name it, like many people's different patterns of shame, chances are they're not the only person who's ever felt shame. Which should at least
you the listener. He's talking about other people, but not you. The person listening, no, this doesn't apply to you. But go on. Right. Tell us about how this is a human universal, except for the person listening.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So there's something about shame that it definitely has a quality of being alone. If I'm alone in my shame, it hurts a lot.
Yes, you are alone. You're the only one that's ever felt this.
Right. Needing therapy. So
everyone just knows this so that they can make fun of you. It's not a real thing. It's just you.
That's just mean.
I'm shame. That's what I'm supposed to do. Stop shaming me for doing my job well.
Well, more like I have this question of like, what's someone supposed to do about it? Oh, great, Mr. Shame over there. What are they supposed to do other than wallow in the shame a bunch more?
They give up. There's nothing they can do.
Other than that.
Other than giving up, I would say the only thing you can do is your best. And it's probably not good enough. And you should do it anyway.
Right.
Because what else are you gonna do?
Actually, kind of good advice.
Yeah, that's Peterson advice.
Do your best, because that's what you can do.
Yeah, and like it's like there's a whole, like if you've never been to therapy, you probably don't know this, that there's this like whole like development, like people have been like developing this for like at least 100 years, depending on how you count it. And I'm not saying it's perfect or even maybe good, but it's something, and it is helpful. And a lot of the stuff is just like there's all these things in your head that are just telling you different things, and there's some truth to them, but they're not really true in a lot of ways. And it's like hard to sort through it, like just to like if you're trying to solve a regular problem, like you can have a problem space, right? Like you could have a desk with a computer and books and pencils and papers, but like to do that into the inside of your head, it's like you doing it to the inside of your head, but you're the inside of your head. So it's the inside of your head doing it to the inside of your head, and probably you're not
confusing. It's kind of nice to have someone else there to keep you guided. It's kind of hard to look at yourself when you're looking at yourself.
Yeah. It would be like doing surgery on yourself, right? Like maybe you're the best surgeon in the world, but it's still really hard to do surgery on yourself.
Or the best dentist doing dentistry on yourself. Like it's kind of a bit hard. The angles are like every you try and reach into your own mouth, it's kind of like difficult.
Yeah, or a lawyer, being a lawyer for them, like self-representing. You have what is it, like a terrible lawyer and a worse client? Or fool for a client. Yes. There's like some line. But...
Right. So one thing I want to say is that therapy is about dealing with what's coming up. And so if what's coming up is like shameful, or if what's coming up is aversion to therapy, like, and you're having a difficulty, like this is a pattern, this is what therapy does. It takes an object, a content in your life, and is like, okay, let's see if we can work through it or deal with it or find a way to interact with it. So it's super powerful at breaking a thing down.
Yeah, I mean, again, like therapy is a thing, like everything, right? Like plumbing, you're gonna get good plumbers and bad plumbers. right? And there's no shame in getting someone to help with your plumbing. It's the same thing with your mind, right? Like you're gonna have good therapists, bad therapists, good techniques, bad techniques, and it's all super complicated.
You're also going to have techniques that work for other people and not for you. Like, okay, like,
yeah, and it goes like different paces and stuff. So yeah, like even when you're starting therapy, and if you're not getting the results right away, like the shame is going to show up and say, hey, it doesn't work on you. There's like a million things. Like, it doesn't work on you. You're not that kind of person. You're not really trying. There's something like too broken. No one will ever understand you.
right. Perfect
else's
therapeutic content. This is the sort of thing that therapists are like, oh, well, if it's showing up that clear, let's like just work with it.
Right. So that's like a weird thing where, like, if this stuff actually shows up and you're like, if you go to therapist and you're like, hey, I'm here, I want to do therapy, but there's all this stuff here that I have to deal with first, like that's actually like really good starting point because you could just like work through all the stuff, like so that you can do therapy well is like working through stuff.
You're still working through the stuff, like the ways in which you I mean, so here's the pattern. I'm trying to go to therapy, but I am encountering shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many other things in my life am I trying to do and then encountering shame? And so if I solve this on the local level of trying to do therapy, encountering my life that I try and do something and encounter shame, I'll probably solve that too. So,
right. Or at least you're getting
to work on. The things I was embarrassed about in school, like every instance of me trying to do a thing and hitting shame can solve all at once in that therapeutic process.
Yeah. Like sort of a cool metaphor that's coming to mind is imagine your house is a super big mess and you're like, okay, I want to clean my house, but so I need some help. So I need to like be able to call the people to pick up the garbage or the people to do this or whatever, but you can't do that because your desk is a mess. So you're like kind of putting the house, cleaning the house on hold to clean up your desk, which is how it feels like, oh, I'm not working on my house, I'm working on my desk, but your desk is a part of your house. And even starting to work on like the small part is going to give you that experience to be able to work on the bigger part. And it's going to give you tools to work on the bigger part. And it's going to give you space. So when the bigger part gets overwhelming and you can't really deal with it, then you have like a space to go where you can, manage the rest of your life, like not just your psyche, but your other needs that need to get met as well. So I think like if you're actually like, if you're experiencing shame when you go into therapy, like before you go into therapy, and you can recognize that you're experiencing shame and it's like debilitating and you can't deal with it, that's actually like really advanced. That's like pretty advanced. Like that's not usually people's first.
Yeah, most people don't even turn up to therapy, right? By the time you're like, oh wow, this feels really shameful, you're like,
right, most people,
great. Congratulations.
Yeah,
self-awareness all the way.
Yeah, most people don't make it to therapy, but even the ones that are usually like pretending that shame isn't there. There, so like even like you acknowledging it and like even like a really good therapeutic technique you can do at home before you get there is to sort of just like sit with the shame, or to still do the thing but do it slower and let the shame exist and let that process, because that's also a thing that's also real. It's also trying to tell you something. It's it's been invited to the party for whatever evolutionary.
Right. My shame has been inviting to the party, and like it's here with me having a real party, telling me all about how shameful I should be right in this moment.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Now I gotta learn to live with it.
And what's a good party without a little bit of shame, right? Like everyone, like I don't know if you guys do parties and stuff, but like you do parties without shame, like that's fine, but they start to get boring. But a little shame like lets you get in that like whatever, it's
vulnerable space. It's actually powerful vulnerable. Like you're at a party and everyone's all surface level and someone's like, oh my god, I'm so ashamed about what happened this week. Everyone's like, what? Tell me more.
Like that so
opens up the party.
I'm so bad. You guys want to hear what I did that was so bad?
Oh my god, the West.
And then everyone's like, yeah, that was bad. You're a terrible person.
You're out of the party.
But at least you get to like know, right? At least you know, like, okay, I'm a terrible person and you can work on it. Right? Like, even if you are a terrible person, like, I don't know if you honestly, like, I was just playing
Yeah, people do bad stuff sometimes.
I don't know if you are or not. Yeah. You might actually be a bad person. And
but wouldn't you like to know more than not know? You probably want to know, because at least then you can, withdraw from society, like recognize that you're causing trouble, like keep your mouth shut. If you're like, oh, I've realized when I talk to people, I'm always rude. I'm going to be quiet for a week. I'm going to say less and like try not to be rude and see if that improves things.
Right. And then like the cool thing about like therapy, sometimes you'll get these realizations like, oh, I should stop being a dick. I should stop being mean to people. And like from the outside, you're like, yeah, that guy's an idiot. Obviously, you should stop doing that. But from the inside, it's very profound. And it's like you can have these moments of like realization and transfer and transformative. Yes. And things that were compulsions beforehand can start to become non-compulsions.
I feel like there's another branch of being ashamed to need therapy, which is the like, sometimes a trauma has happened to you and it's not your fault. And you're like, why do I have to go to therapy to deal with it when I was just a little kid and I was beat up by the bullies at school, right? It wasn't my fault I got beat up. Why do I need
I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I being punished by having to sit through therapy?
Right. Which is a completely different branch. Like,
yeah, I think for that, the response is because you want to change the world. You want things to be different. And this is how you do it. If you wanted to learn plumbing, you would go to plumbing school.
Right.
If you want to learn electrician, you become like apprentice under them.
Well, I would say that like fundamentally the thing that happened to you, much as the bully should also get therapy. Like, you have a relationship with yourself where you got bullied. Like, okay, you're going to have to make peace with your experience in some way, and not make peace by like shut it down, squash it and forget it, but make peace in the like self-compassion, the kindness, generosity, other compassion, the, what am I looking for here? There's like I understand that happened and it wasn't my fault. Whereas, there's probably part of me that's like, spoilers, I deserve to get bullied or something, right? Okay, we got to find that part, process it as well.
Yeah, that's the therapy part, but I'm thinking more of like the shame coming into it before it.
Right. I didn't do anything wrong. Why do I need therapy?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the very simple answer is because you're a human, and part of the human psyche is to get traumatized by things that other animals
over our entire lifetime, over and over.
Yeah, but like this is like our evolutionary design, is that like empathy is built into our evolutionary strategy. Or if you want, if you're religious, then it's God has endowed us with the like the
trials and tribulations that we can overcome.
Yeah, and part of like being human and living in the path of God is to connect and to open ourselves up. And when you open yourself up and become vulnerable, you get hurt. Right? Like lions live their lives is very traumatic. They but like also lion, like their whole life is just like murder. And maybe they don't have this trauma because that's their evolutionary strategy, right? But then when a new lion comes in to the pride, he'll kill all the older lions' cubs.
Kids. Yeah.
So like we don't live this way. This is not how humans exist.
Instead, we take psychological damage and then have to process it.
Yeah. And so because we don't do this, we open ourselves up, we become vulnerable, and that vulnerability can get hurt. And there are people, they're like technicians, they're like they kind of work with your mind and psyche. And it's good to learn about that stuff. It's good stuff. It's useful in a lot of ways. Except for you, because you're just kidding. But like that thing will keep coming up. Like that's part of shame. That's the voice. And it's I wouldn't say don't listen to it, but I would say like it's not always nice.
Well, I would say something like this is part of your psyche that is not aligned with you, or it's like a part of your psyche that is whose job it is to shame you. And okay, it's doing a job, it's trying to get something to happen. Like, maybe it's trying to tell you you should feel bad, because if you feel bad, then you won't do it again. Nice theory. That's not quite how motivation works, but
Yeah,
it's trying to do a thing. Like, okay, if we want to get you getting along with your psyche, we're going to have to work with this part of it.
Right.
Get it to a better place.
Right. And yeah, I was gonna say something, but I forgot. And that's gonna happen a lot as well, because like things are going on and like there's a lot of threads going on and they start to intersect, right? Oh yeah, I was gonna say it's super interesting when the shame voice takes on the voice of someone that you know. So like in our heads, it's more like when you're younger, I think this happens more, but even older people, this happens
sometimes. The vocal tone is like, oh, that's the voice of my bully.
Yeah, or that's the voice of my mother, right? Like, or my parents, because your parents, like, depending on how you're raised, but your parents are probably like trying to get you to do a bunch of things and would tell you stuff over and over again. And so that gets inside your head. And, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but in a lot of cases, it's things that were designed for you when you were younger, but now you're older and you don't need someone in your head to be telling at you that all the time that the road is dangerous, because you're old enough to understand this and you're able to like make those decisions. And so also part of therapy is processing those voices and processing whatever, all that stuff. I don't know. There's like a lot of it.
There's also, I see a branch of ashamed to need therapy in like an older generation. The younger generation seems a lot easier, more comfortable in the like, oh, I should just go get this checked out by the professional of the domain. The older generation is like, there's nothing wrong with my brain. Some sort of stubbornness.
And there might not be anything wrong with your brain.
Well, there probably isn't, but hey, these bits aren't working together. I said these bits of the mind aren't working well together. Maybe that's why they need a
or the other thing is like I'm just seeing the perspective of some people when before they come into therapy and they think that they don't need it. Maybe you don't need therapy, and maybe a loved one needs therapy and you're there for them. But I think to honor the therapeutic process is to open yourself up and be vulnerable,
right?
With what's going on. And maybe you're opening it up and it's vulnerable and people are seeing what's inside you and you're sharing. And then that can be like a really beautiful connection.
Right. There's that facilitation of that by the therapist in the rebuilding of connection between loved ones.
Yeah.
And like, what is the best way if you don't need therapy? If you're like, okay, my partner, my child, someone in my life has invited me to therapy, but I'm like, I don't need therapy. What is the best way for me to like turn that around and be like, okay, I don't need it, but I'm going to be as supportive as possible. Right. So I'm going to show up, obviously going to show up to therapy, going to listen carefully, got to be attentive, going to be curious. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to be like, if they ask me questions, I want to like go in as deep as I can to like reflect on like what's going on for me. I'm going to reflect on like what matters to me. I'm going to hear out what I need to hear out. I'm going to be proactive here in engaging with the therapeutic process, because if it's going to help this person who's, part of my extended connected network and who's thought gently enough and committed enough to work on themselves, I'm going to help, right? I'm going to show up. Like, I want to set up that frame so that they're like, oh, wow, Elliot is on board with me to fix my life. He's in my court. He's on my team.
Yeah. I think like one of the big ways as well is to, if not the biggest way, is like if I'm like if I'm there, if I'm feeling shame or then if Elliot's there doing the thing, it becomes normal.
Right.
So if like I go to a party and everybody's like doing this thing, then I'm like, oh, I could just do this thing as well, right? But if I'm there at a party and I think there's like this intervention, like the old school interventions where everybody's sitting around just telling you how bad of a person you are.
Right. This
like
is an intervention. You're
that they're
drinking too
shaming
much.
you. Huh?
This is an intervention. You're drinking too much. All 20
Right.
of us are sitting here saying like this is an intervention, and you're like,
Yeah.
what the? This is just
Right. And then they
confronting and
get surprised when
uncomfortable.
people don't want to sit through that. Like, no, right? But if everybody's there and like this is just sort of what you're doing, it can be like antsy and uncomfortable and like new. But I encourage you to try new things. You might like them if you stick with it long enough and start to get good at it. Like everything else in life.
All right, last words on why am I so ashamed of needing therapy?
Because you're a terrible person.